We're diving deep into the Dynasty rankings today, looking at some sleepers that are probably available on your waiver wire. We're going to start a little bit up top, some guys that you might have to trade a third round pick for, but stick with us. We are going to get progressively deeper and deeper as the show goes on. Joined as always today with Jeff Bell. And Jeff, we're not going back and forth. We didn't really pick guys. We kind of just worked together to come up with a list here. And the first guy we're going to talk about is a guy we talked about a lot this offseason, getting a lot of buzz right now out of Seattle camp. Tory Horton. What is it about Tory Horton that you like specifically? Do you think this guy could actually make an impact in his rookie season?
Oh, I think he can absolutely make an impact. And really, when it comes down to it, it seems he's already worked his way into the top three of the receiving rotation. And that's what you're looking for a deep rookie. Somebody that during camp is able to work their way into that rotation. He should be the deep threat for this offense. When you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp as the other two receivers, you've got Tory Horton taking the top off the defense. And so that opens it up for it's not the Puka Nacua math, to be clear. But at the same time, when Puka Nacua came in, he did one thing very, very well. And because he was able to do that one thing really, really well on win on one route where he kind of was working 10 to 18 yards downfield, turn around, catch the ball, and then run through somebody's face, Tory Horton gets on the field as the field stretcher. And then if something were to happen to Jackson Smith and Jigba or Cooper Kupp, and Horton is excelling in that role, well, they're going to bring Marcus Valdes-Scantling in. And we know Marcus Valdes-Scantling can really only do one thing, which could open up Tory Horton for an opportunity to attack in other areas of the field as well.
Yeah, and for me, I'm a big fan of Tory Horton. I like the prospect coming in. Obviously, slipped a little bit because of medical concerns, but did a show earlier today with Greg Branos of Coach Speak Index, and we talked a little bit about Tory Horton, and he made a really good point that he pays close attention to everything coaches are saying. He's like, Sean McVay talked about Cooper Kupp like he was a son. Like he loved Cooper Kupp more than any other coach loved any other player, and they were willing to just cut him after this season, which probably speaks a lot to where he's at in his career. So I think there's this expectation right now that, well, Tory Horton's the wide receiver 3, but I don't know if we should be putting a whole lot of faith in Cooper Kupp at this point in his career and the way that injuries have piled up on him. So this guy isn't far away, Tory Horton, from being number 2 on the team in targets. And then the other thing I look at is the X receiver role in a Clint Kubiak offense. We saw Rashid Shaheed was a top 12 wide receiver to start the year before getting hurt. We saw them go out and trade last year for Marquez Valdes-Scantling in the middle of the season. He immediately puts up 232 yards and 4 touchdowns in his first 3 games there. You flash back a couple of years ago, Brandon Ayuk is the X receiver in that San Francisco offense. That's when he saw his big breakout. And now Tory Horton gets to play that role that we have seen very, very valuable, where you can catch these deep balls downfield that allow him to create after the catch. This is a guy with blazing speed. So JSN, very much so in on JSN, but Tory Horton could easily be second on this team in targets. And where I was scared off a little bit by Seattle earlier in the offseason, just great reports coming out consistently about Sam Darnold. I like what they've done with the offensive line as well. I think this is one of those offenses that we had kind of written off a while back that now all of a sudden might be a little bit better than we expect. So let's keep moving down the list here, Jeff. Harold Fannon, this one really piques my interest. You provided his name here, so go ahead and start us off. What is it about Harold Fannon that you like so much?
Well, I like that he is taking slot snaps, that he has the ability to be in their base personnel for Cleveland immediately as a rookie. And I think they could run base 12 personnel, treating him as the slot receiver because he's not going to be the inline option. And then we know we've got Joe Flacco leading that offense. And if you think back to the second half of 2023, when David Njoku was, I think, tight end 3, over that stretch, it was with Joe Flacco. A lot of what David Njoku was doing in that stretch were shorter passes, kind of bubble screens for a tight end, those types of things. And those are the types of things that Harold Fannon can bring into this offense, immediately contribute there. I mean, Deontay Johnson, we're not hearing good reports about him. Jamari Thornton. Jamari Thrash. That's right.
Yes.
Thrash is working as the slot there right now. And so you've got Thrash as the slot, second-year player, don't really know what you have there. Harold Fannon can claim that role and be the every down slot, and I don't think it's being looked at as a redraft play right now because of the presence of David Njoku.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. And this is one where I kind of dove into the film because I went on with Matt Waldman and we talked a little bit about Harold Fannon and didn't play a ton in his first preseason game. But on all 4 passing downs that he was on the field, he was lined up in the slot. And it wasn't just running these short little routes that you expect to see a tight end running out of the slot. He was running deep downfield. He ran a nice little fade route where he was like 25 yards downfield and was wide open. The two times that we did see him as a blocker were on running plays, and he did that well. So, I mean, this is a guy who is just immediately acclimating. We were talking about it. Well, not we, kind of the royal we, but a lot of people were talking about Harold Fannon as a first round pick in the draft this year. And then he came out, didn't have the best combine performance, and that caused him to fall a little bit. But this guy, if you look at what he did at Bowling Green, just historic numbers last year. Like the offense ran through him. So outside of Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku, there aren't a lot of options here. I could absolutely see him stepping up and being a big part of Cleveland's plans this year. Keep moving down the list a little bit, and like I said, we'll get deeper and deeper as we go on here. Manungai right now being rated as the RB 60, 198th overall on Keep Trade Cut, and we've talked about him quite a bit this offseason, but it just very much so appears as if Manungai is the RB2 ahead of Roschon Johnson. We've heard some beat reporters speculate that maybe Roschon Johnson has the inside track, but everything we've heard from Ben Johnson, Declan Doyle, Eric Bieniemy, they're just gushing about him. He has to shore up his pass blocking a little bit, but we don't expect to see him out there on passing downs. That's where we'll see DeAndre Swift. But I think this is going to be their early down grinder and the guy who can come in near the goal line where DeAndre Swift really, really struggles. And it is so easy to see the parallels to what Jamal Williams did in a Ben Johnson offense just a couple of years ago.
I want to ask you, I know that you are covering the Bears for our Football Guys Training Camp series, one of the very best pieces of content that we do. And if you've not checked out the companion podcast that we're doing with our friend Daniel Hendry as well, make sure to check that out. Brian Robinson, we know that Eric Bieniemy was in Washington last year, and there are some ties there with Brian Robinson. Do you see that as the Bears being in play for Brian Robinson at all, or do you think they're pretty committed to Manungai at this point?
I think they're pretty committed to Manungai. I mean, when Ben Johnson is coming out like the second week of training camp and saying this guy's earned our trust and we want to lean on him deep into the fall, that says a lot. You don't hear that about rookies all the time. Typically, what we hear about rookies is they're coming along fine, showing some flashes. We like what we've seen, but like talking about trust and talking about leaning on him, that piqued my interest so much. And also, yeah, Bieniemy was in Washington last year, but Brian Robinson kind of got benched. I mean, and I know a lot of people, every time we mention this, people are in the comments saying, oh, he hurt his hamstring. But we're starting to get some clarity now, like coming out. Ben Standig just talked about it, that they were not happy with the lack of aggression that he was playing with, that he was kind of playing a little bit too patient behind the line, that he wasn't hitting his holes the way that he was supposed to. So it sounds like they are willing to just flat out cut Brian Robinson at this point if they can't find a trade partner. And Eric Bieniemy, having been a part of that last year, a part of kind of making that switch over to Austin Eckler, I could be wrong, but I don't think that Bieniemy wants to reunite with Brian Robinson.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at where the market is right now, I think it's out there, and I think plugged in people realize that Manungai has probably moved ahead of Roschon Johnson, but I think this is a real opportunity that I don't know that it's consensus there, because I still see in best ball drafts Roschon Johnson going before Manungai. I still see Manungai falling down.
Tightening up. Finally, it's getting tight, but yes, Roschon Johnson still has a higher ADP.
So grab Kyle Manungai.
Yeah, and I don't want to say it's like the end of the road for Roschon Johnson, but this guy's been given ample opportunity, and he just hasn't really done much with it at this point. So I know, a fun player to watch at Texas, but at the end of the day, this is a day 3 running back who really hasn't done much throughout his career. I know there's always kind of these truthers that hold on to these running backs and wait for it to break out. But if you still have Roschon Johnson and there's somebody out there in your league and you can cash in for like a 3rd round pick, I think you got to do it at this point, because it just doesn't sound like he's a part of their long-term plans. All right, Jeff. Yeah.
Really, he was a mystery box coming out of Texas because he sat behind Bijan Robinson. So it's like, if you're sitting behind the best guy, we don't know what you have. So let's keep investing in the mystery box. And I think the Bears are done with that.
And you want to talk about like the mystery box, like he was drafted to be a pass protector. Like that's what he did well at Texas. And then for whatever reason comes into the NFL and it's like the worst part of his game. He's a terrible pass protector. And it's like the opportunities were so limited at Texas that the player that we thought that he was, it just couldn't have been more different than who he actually developed into. All right, Jeff, I want you to take this next one. Troy Franklin, wide receiver 81. We're now outside of the top 200. He is ranked 207th overall. Talk to me about Troy Franklin and why you think he could be a deep sleeper.
Yeah, so sometimes when we are doing prospecting, when we're working on the Football Guys Rookie Guide, I was very high on Troy Franklin last year. Throughout the process, I liked the what I thought the speed was there, and I liked the his ability, and I had him as a top 10 receiver, a top 5 receiver at even periods of the rookie process. And so sometimes you're wrong, but then sometimes it comes back around a little bit. And I think
Sometimes
that
you're
right now,
early.
sometimes you might be early. And right now, it sounds like there's a persistent drumbeat coming out of Broncos camp that Troy Franklin has really stepped forward here in the second year. I think he was challenged a little bit to work on himself physically. And I think he did that over the offseason, and it's really starting to show up. Playing with his college teammate, Bo Nix, and having that development, having that opportunity. We saw the trade yesterday for Devon Vele moving to the Saints, opening up opportunity there. And that really should come down to whether it be Troy Franklin or Pat Bryant on earning those reps. What player
Yeah.
is going to step into there? And I think that Troy Franklin, we know on base camp, RC Salami grabbed him in the Fessel OG League and was
Mhm.
kind of saying that he's the number 2 wide receiver in Broncos camp right now. And I think that it's really an opportunity to still be able to move on that. I don't know that consensus is there at all. And really because of the presence of the exciting young rookie Pat Bryant, that also we're expecting the breakout from Marvin Mims and also Evan Ingram, but also we know Cortland Sutton. And at some point, you're just stacking these things on top of each other. But to grab a player like Franklin, that supposedly is the wide receiver 2 right now, I think it's a great opportunity.
What do you think about that Devon Vele trade? Like, what were the Saints thinking? 27-year-old going into year two, give up a fourth and a seventh. Like, if you look at the trade pick value calculator, whatever you call it, like they basically gave up a third round pick for Devon Vele. Well, do you have any thoughts on that?
You could. I mean, you could have got George Pickens, but sometimes you get Devon Vele. To me, maybe they just really value his blocking. I think maybe they're looking at it and saying, we've got Rashid Shahida, we've got Chris Olave, and we've got Alvin Kamara. We need a guy that can just get out there and block the heck out of guys downfield. And maybe that's what they were thinking with Devon
I'm sure
Vele.
they could have gotten Alan Lazard for cheaper than a third, but what are you gonna do? About the same age too. All right, let's keep moving down the list here. I will say I agree with you on Troy Franklin though. Big riser for me, largely just in part because of what Cecil Lammy had said. He's there every single day at camp and talking about how he is just taking over, and that's why they were content to move on from Vele. So all right, Jeff, now we're getting deep. Now we're in sicko mode. We are outside of the top 300 players on Keep Trade Cut. Tez Johnson right now ranked as the wide receiver 121, 334th overall. I'm going to let you take this one. I don't have a super strong Tez Johnson take, so I want to hear what you've got to say about him.
I mean, it's opportunity when it comes down to it. And we're moving between college teammates here. We had Troy Franklin was college teammates with Tez Johnson, who was also college teammates with Bo Nix. So that's a lot of fun. Right now, we got the news the other day that Jalen McMillan is going to be out probably for the first half of the season. We did get news today that they're not going to keep Chris Godwin on the pup as the season starts rolling in here.
Can I just real
But we
quickly?
also,
I just want to talk about that report because I am so confused by that report. They said he's not going to start the year on pup. They're hoping that he can start practicing around week 2 and make a return in October. First game in October is week 5. Why? I don't know. Like I'm not going to try to understand it. All I'm doing is parroting the report, and I will let you, the audience, try to figure out what that means. But something isn't adding up to me. Like I am not the biggest numbers guy, but the math ain't mathing.
yeah, and to me, I think they really just wanted to allow the opportunity that maybe Chris Godwin wakes up one day and everything is great, and they really need a receiver, or God forbid they lose an Emeka Buka or a Mike Evans, and maybe they're thinking we might need to get a little bit aggressive with this timeline here because this is a team that has high expectations. They have playoff. They think they're going to be in the playoffs, and they have every right to think that they'll be in the playoffs. It was a playoff team last year, but now they've got a lot of opportunity in that receiver room. Now that you've removed Jalen McMillan and removed Chris Godwin, and Tez Johnson's a player that he has driven some drum beats when given opportunity throughout his rookie training camp here. And so seeing him stepping in, I don't know. It's really tough because he's not really built for volume, and I don't know that he's going to be a deep player that to be able to kind of create these splash plays. So he's just gonna kind of be out there maybe a little bit, but sometimes with rookies, it only takes one good game, and in Dynasty, the to the moon.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm definitely picking up what you're selling. I did have some concerns about Tez Johnson just because of the size. I'm afraid that he will have to rely on some gadgety usage, but that is why he is ranked 334th overall. And again, we're talking about deep sleepers here. Like Tez Johnson was probably getting drafted in the fourth or fifth round of your dynasty rookie draft. Somebody might have already drafted or dropped him for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt or somebody else. Like he's probably out there on waivers in a bunch of dynasty leagues right now. And you do talk about it, opportunity. That's all we really are looking for at this point. And it's going to be Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka to start the year. Mike Evans is getting up there in age. He dealt with some injuries last year. It is not far-fetched to think that Tez Johnson could quickly be a full-time player to start the year. So yeah, definitely worth a pickup and a stash, even if you're just throwing them on your taxi squad and just like kind of waiting to see how this shakes out. I think that's a good call out there. Keep moving down the list now. Phil Mafa, RB 88, 347th overall. Seems like we're getting some mixed reports. One day you get hey, Phil Mafa's looked really good in camp, and then the next day you hear, he's kind of on the roster bubble. So I don't know what to make of this, but I definitely understand why you wanted to add him to the list, because this is just a wide open, very ambiguous room right now. And it sounds like it's kind of coming down to Miles Sanders or Phil Mafa. One of these guys is going to make the team and one's going to get cut.
Yeah, and it's coming down to that. And one of those guys is young and has club control, and the other guy has he had a strong start to camp, but he's been out with some injuries, and it just doesn't seem like he's running away with his opportunity. And so so often we see in those decisions, it tends to be the GM and the coach. They go with the guy they drafted because they want to feel smart at drafting the guy. And at some levels, if Miles Sanders is not locked into a immediate contributor, that he's playing heavy volume for the Cowboys, you can probably find a Miles Sanders on the street, and you probably want to give the rookie a little bit more of an opportunity to see if he's able to continue to grow in there. But this backfield is wide open, and I think that that's where, and Phil Mafa is kind of the forgotten about guy, that even when you look at the rookie class overall of the running backs that got drafted, Mafa ends up as the forgotten player because Jaden Blue's there, because he's a later pick. But I think grab these running backs because the opportunity arises for them. And it's going to be really curious to see what that offensive line is going to be able to do, losing Zach Martin, having a rookie Tyler Booker step in there. And if they are able to produce for the run game, or if they're not, maybe they try out Phil Mafa at some point. And I think that these are the players that, while we can talk about Tez Johnson playing and being on the field and those types of things, Phil Mafa finds himself as a lead back, early down goal line type back. You can actually put him into your fantasy lineup.
Right. And I think when you look at it just stylistically, he is, I don't want to say cut from the same cloth as Javonte Williams, because he's even bigger than Javonte Williams. But, if they are going to release Miles Sanders, that means that they're going to go into the season with Javonte Williams and Jaden Blue. Javonte Williams, he can do the short yardage stuff, of course, but this is also a guy that has dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his career. So if it gets to the point that, an injury to Javonte Williams happens, Jaden Blue cannot do the things that Phil Mafa can do. I mean, we're talking about a hammer here, like 6'1", nearly 240 pounds. This is a Dallas team that we expect to score a lot. Dak Prescott is healthy. They made investments in George Pickens to make the passing game better. And even if we're looking at like just a goal line vulture role here, there should be enough scoring in Dallas that alone can provide some value. So we'll be watching closely as camp cuts happen next week to see whether they make that choice between Phil Mafa or Miles Sanders. But if Phil Mafa makes the team, he could easily find himself in a role, and maybe even a more valuable role than Miles Sanders would have. It's just kind of an added depth piece. So pick him up now, because if he does end up making the team, he's going to shoot up in value. All right, let's keep on moving down the list, getting deeper and deeper. And this one, I'm kind of shocked to see him ranked behind Phil Mafa, because there has been a lot of buzz for Chris Rodriguez Jr. And what I'll say, Jeff, we talked about this on the show the other night, and I tweeted this out as well, much to the dismay of everybody, because I was just the big wet blanket on the Little Bill party. But Corey Krosky Merritt, what I tweeted is I said, I think that this Brian Robinson public splitting up is more of an indictment on him than it is a boon for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. And then later that day, Adam Schefter comes out with a podcast and he says, everyone needs to pump the brakes on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Like they're happy with this full running back room here, and they just thought that Brian Robinson wasn't a good stylistic fit. And then Ben Standig says something similar today. They're talking with Dan Quinn in a press conference, and Dan Quinn says, yeah, we can see Chris Rodriguez being that short yardage guy for us. So all signs are pointing to a committee here. It is not going to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt getting 300 touches out of this backfield. Chris Rodriguez, if he's the early down goal line guy, there can be value there. So I know I just shared a lot of thoughts on Chris Rodriguez, but do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, if you really parse this up, it's going to be either Chris Rodriguez or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt when it comes down to it, because Austin Eckler is going to have a role, and we know he's going to have the passing down role. And if Chris Rodriguez, it can't really be both, because if Chris Rodriguez is playing, he's going to have the goal line work, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt will play. I absolutely believe any scenario he will be on the field. But the thing of it is, if that on the field is 10 carries for 45 yards and he's not getting goal line work and he's hardly getting targets, and you're splicing this up between Chris Rodriguez, you've got Austin Eckler, you've got Jaden Daniels rushing, you've got Deebo Samuel's involvement, gosh, it's really going to be hard to deliver on some of the really aggressive movement that we've seen around Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and to the benefit of Chris Rodriguez. And this is an offense that should be a very good offense. They were one of the top scoring offenses last year, top 5 offense. So the opportunity should be there, just as a vulture. Just like, I'm old enough that I remember Mike Tolbert, and Mike Tolbert,
that's where you're going. Yep.
Yes, did like hardly anything other than he just got touchdowns, and you could put him into your lineup because he would just get touchdowns. And I think Chris Rodriguez could be that type of guy.
Trying to think who was the Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. He had that year in
John Kuhn had a little bit of a run where he was getting goal line work, and they're used to be a really real thing. But now the quarterbacks, they just shove the quarterbacks into the end zone.
Yeah,
that's
a little bit different these days. And I think with Chris Rodriguez too, like as it stands, I think there probably isn't a ton of value here. But I look, Austin Eckler is somebody that the coaching staff trusts a lot. And we saw him, more than half the snaps over the second half of the season, a big part of what they were doing in that NFC Championship game, consistently catching passes out of the backfield. But he is kind of locked into his role. I think it's that early down role, and the goal line role is still kind of a toss-up between Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez. So it might be a split on early down touches to start the year, which there isn't a ton of value, but an injury away from being in the Brian Robinson role, which we saw just 2 years ago for the first half of the season was giving us RB1 value. So they will lean on a running back if they have a guy that can shoulder the load. And I think while it could start off as a frustrating and murky committee sort of approach, we could see some clarity as the season progresses, and an injury could open the doors for an even bigger workload.
And two,
all right,
Jeremy McNichols is a name that's not mentioned in all of this. And every projection that I've seen has Jeremy McNichols making the roster and being the backup to Austin Eckler. So you got 4 backs here. And so that's the biggest thing. You got 4 backs. And so it's not even the type of opportunity and this really, I guess, is kind of the Krosky-Merritt conversation, because I don't think people are factoring in Jeremy McNichols. And I understand that like this guy is like way off the radar, and I think he was out of football for 2 years before last year. This coaching staff loves him, and if he's making the team, then you don't even have the out of, if Austin Eckler were to miss time, then you're not going to make Chris Rodriguez the receiving back. They're going to play McNichols in there too, and so but at the same, that being said, Krosky-Merritt is the most explosive player that they've got as a backfield option, and he could just run away with the job. I think he's the most explosive player that they have.
I think Chris Rodriguez has some explosion in there too. But when you talk about Jeremy McNichols,
not consider Chris Rodriguez explosive. I've been following him since Kentucky. I would not consider him an explosive player.
He had a 40-something yard run in that game the other day. It was well blocked, and he got out there. But when you talk about Jeremy McNichols, he was on my mind, but I intentionally omitted him from the conversation because I see him in the Austin Eckler bucket, where
Right.
like he'll get some passing down work. He'll come in as a pass blocker, and we can see some targets here. Where I think it's kind of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez Jr. over here, early down goal line
But
stuff, and then you've
you
got Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols over here on passing downs.
well, you're very sharp and you do see that. I don't know that it's realized maybe. And so maybe there's a thought out there that if Austin Eckler were to miss time, well then Krosky Merritt's going to be the receiving back and it is wheels up.
I don't think so. I don't. That's not the read I have on this, but we'll find out. Again, I mean, we should do a show next week just on roster cuts, and really, that's when we start to really get an idea of what these murky backfields will look like. But speaking of murky backfields, this is a deep one. I didn't expect to be talking about Kenneth Gainwell much this offseason, but you look at what's happening in Pittsburgh, and first of all, again, like we're getting super, super deep here. All right, so when we're talking about these guys, we're not saying like Kenneth Gainwell is going to be a league winner this year and Chris Rodriguez. No, that's not what we're doing. We're
Yeah.
trying to be as nuanced as we can about these conversations here. But when I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, um, Jalen Warren was a guy that I kind of had a fade on early in the offseason, but it is, dare I say, like concerning how much work they have been getting Jalen Warren and that he is taking the majority of his reps with the ones. It sounds like Caleb Johnson just isn't, getting up to speed the way that they had hoped. We talk so much when we're looking at rookies when they first come into the draft. Every rookie is going to hit the high end range of outcomes. They're all going to be immediate impact players. But then the reality is, a lot of guys do flame out quickly. And when we're looking at a round 3 running back, the hit rate is less than 50%. So what we thought Caleb Johnson was just going to get plopped into Najee Harris's role and that he's got breakaway speed that Najee Harris didn't. And he's going to be Najee Harris on steroids. We might need to pump the brakes on that a little bit because he is struggling with pass protection. He's struggling with his hands. He's not hitting the breakaway runs that they had hoped for. So I see Kenneth Gainwell is a very capable back and a very well-rounded back as well. He can catch passes. He can get involved as a receiver. He can, rip off the big plays as well. So I don't want to say that Caleb Johnson is going to be a bust because it's way too early to say that, but it is definitely within the range of outcomes. And if that does happen where he just can't get up to NFL speed, Kenneth Gainwell is going to be the number 2 guy, getting a lot of those Najee Harris touches behind Jalen Warren and just free in drafts right now. As soon as he left Philadelphia, I think a lot of people just dropped him from their waiver wire, made room for other players. And he's a guy that I've picked up in a handful of leagues and I'm just kind of stashing to see how this Pittsburgh Steelers backfield ends up shaking out throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, we know they're in it to win it with Aaron Rodgers this year, and Aaron Rodgers is not going to mess around with a back that's not picking up protections, that's not making the the kind of the right chip and then releasing to the route, those types of things. Aaron Rodgers isn't going to put up with that, and it is interesting that you talk about like it is a sad reality of like back in rookie season, back in draft time, like all these guys are awesome, and it's. So I'm doing my home league. We had a little bit of pushback this year that people didn't want to draft in April. It's a little bit more of a casual dynasty league and home league. And so we moved the draft to August. And let me tell you, like this is an eye-opening experience to go from
Caleb Johnson wasn't going top 5 in this one, I'm guessing.
Yes, it's like when you're in May and in April and you're doing your rookie draft and every rookie is awesome and look at these guys, look at this class I put together with all these picks, and then you get into August and you're like, well, there's 9 guys that I want, and then I don't know who's going to go here. It's an interesting experience of how many players really do lose the value immediately when they're going through training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just the sad reality of the NFL. This is just the way that things end up playing out. And again, I'm not sounding the alarms on Caleb Johnson, but it doesn't sound like he's getting up to speed as quickly as they hoped. I mean, I think the expectation was that he would just be the RB1 in week 1, and that might not be the case now. So you also talk about the pass blocking with Aaron Rodgers, and that's where Kenneth Gainwell really excelled during his time in Philadelphia. Just a fantastic pass blocker. So that alone could push him up the depth chart. So again, this might be nothing. We're getting super, super deep here, but Kenneth Gainwell definitely worth a stash. Another stash, and it sounds like this guy is going to make the team. Jeff, you were in on Eftton Kism, like way before anybody else was. You were talking about this guy back in February, and then funny enough, like once we started to get a little drumbeat about him, everybody immediately was just like, Patriot, this guy's a Patriot, and then he goes undrafted. Patriots immediately sign him. Like, what do we? Is this the next Julian Edelman, Wes Welker. Is this going to be the slot receiver in Foxborough?
I know I put it out there in early February that he's a future Patriot, so
Yep.
that is documented out there. So yeah, I mean he kind of is. It's exactly, and that was when I was writing him up for the rookie guide and watched him, I was like, wow, huh. Okay, I see exactly what this is. This is it. Danny Amendola, like Wes Welker. Here we go. This is that type of
Converted
dude.
quarterback by chance? Do we know about Eftton Kism? Do we know what he did in high school?
He he actually, well, at Eastern Washington. You know who else was at Eastern Washington?
Cooper Cup?
Cooper Cup. Cooper
Yeah.
Cup was at Eastern Washington, and he's like a legend at Eastern Washington. And Kism, I don't think he broke any of the records because Cup's records were
Yep.
absolutely
Right.
insane at Eastern Washington, but it wasn't that far off. It was, and it's fascinating because Kism has talked about being like idolizing Cooper Cup and like studying Cooper Cup. And it's just one that when you watch the tape, the nuance was there. You knew exactly what he was doing. And I knew Josh McDaniels being back with the Patriots and seeing this guy that has the nuance that he's required out of the slot position in the past. It was a match made in heaven, and I'm glad it's going down. And you're exactly right; he's going to make the roster. I would be shocked if he doesn't make the roster today. I saw Jalen Polk they announced
Yes.
season-ending IR there, and part of me can't help but wonder if that wasn't a we have way too many guys and we have to cut some guys that we don't really want to. And Jalen Polk, you've not been having a very good camp, but also we don't want to just cut you. So there's probably is an issue. There's probably a real injury there, but at the same time, is it a IR injury? I mean, they had to do some musical chairs there with the wide receivers because of the play of Kism getting onto that roster.
Yeah, and it sounds like Javon Baker, another guy that they invested heavily in the draft last year, also having a bad camp, talking about him on the roster bubble. So with Kayshon Boutte playing well, with Stephon Diggs being healthy, Demario Douglas obviously doing what Demario Douglas does, Eftton Kism could make this team. And it's looking increasingly more likely by the day. So another guy that, if you were doing a draft back in April or May around the NFL draft, Eftton Kism wasn't getting touched in any drafts because he was an undrafted guy that nobody expected to make the team. But things are changing here, and he could absolutely be involved. All right, we got a few guys left that we want to talk about here, and now we are really in the weeds. We're outside of the top 400 players, Jeff. Like we're digging for gold here. Kavonte Turpin, another, like Eftton Kism, undrafted guy, ranked as the wide receiver 150 in consensus rankings right now. And we've talked about this guy a lot. For anybody who was watching this show on YouTube right now, you probably aren't aware, but Jeff and I, we've done 3 of these training camp podcasts now with our friend Dan Hendry, and it seems like Kavonte Turpin has come up on every single one of them. We talked earlier when discussing Phil Mafa that this is a very mercurial and hard to understand backfield. One thing that is lacking from the backfield is a guy who can just take a ball to the house, and that's what Kavonte Turpin can do. And we've seen it on special teams, but now what we're hearing out of Dallas is that he's getting involved as a running back, as this gadgety receiver that they're getting the ball to on screens and end arounds and things of that nature. So talk a little bit about Kavonte Turpin and how high his ceiling could be in this Dallas offense.
Yeah, I do feel like this is a little bit of the white whale in fantasy, where it's like 2 tight end
Yeah.
stats, or like a running back playing out of the slot. It's like the kick returner is getting involved in offense, but um, Turpin is a legitimate wide receiver. He was a true freshman. If you are a college football fan and you remember, it was 10 years ago at this point, but there was a TCU team that had Josh Doxson and Trayvon Boykin, and it was a really fun team. And you see, I'm wearing my Ohio State Buckeyes shirt today, and it was not to rub it into Horned Frogs' faces, but Kavonte Turpin was a freshman on that team. They missed the college football playoff, finished 5th. Ohio State knocked them out, but he was an immediate impact true freshman on that team. He was a massive riser, immediately got into some off the field trouble, and then had a little bit of a circuitous path into the NFL. He's made it now, and every single report that I've seen is he's pretty well locked into the wide receiver 3 in that offense. They're getting him touches out of the backfield. There are multiple different ways to get him the ball in his hands, and he is the type of player that he can make the catch over his shoulder. He can beat somebody deep. He can be the deep threat on the offense to allow a George Pickens or it allows CeeDee Lamb to work underneath, but also he can be that guy that just creates. You get the ball in his hands. We've seen him. He was a first team All Pro as a kick returner last year. I mean, this
Yep.
is like Devin Hester type of a kick returner almost, like to that level, because he is so explosive. And you've got CeeDee Lamb, obviously. You've got George Pickens opening up space there. There is going to be so much room for a player to be able to create underneath. And it's like, are you going to do that with Javonte Williams, or maybe are you going to slide Kavonte Turpin into there, give him the ball in space, and make a real problem for defenses?
I'm sorry if you saw my eyes darting around a little bit. I was looking for something. I was listening to you, Jeff, but yeah, you know the answer to the question. But you know who had the fastest ball carrier speed last year?
Probably Kavonte Turpin.
Yeah, 22.4 miles per hour. Like
He's fast. Yeah.
nobody else came close to that. He also had the 8th fastest touch last year on a 18-yard kickoff return within 18 yards. Like you look at all of these other guys that reached their top speed, 64 yards, 85 yards, 70 yards. It took him 18 yards to get up to a speed that, Jahmyr Gibbs was getting at on his 54-yard reception. I mean, this is just unbelievable burst, unbelievable speed. And yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I think that is lacking from this offense. You've got CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, two great receivers, but you don't have that guy that can just score from anywhere on the field. And that's something that Turpin can do. And all we've heard nonstop, reading all of these training camp reports, is that he is having a great camp and that he is going to be involved on offense. So again, we're getting deep here. We're outside the top 400 players. Like in most dynasty leagues, we're looking at, just over 200 even being rostered. So, Jeff, we're in a lot of leagues together. I'm sure you saw the notifications like 2 weeks ago. I picked up Kavonte Turpin in like every dynasty league that I'm in, just on the off chance that he does end up being a bigger part of the offense.
And I love that
Yeah.
point, because I love that point. We know how explosive he is. And I've seen pushback on people just writing it off as saying, well, that can't happen. This is one of the most explosive players in the NFL. Like, have him on your team just because in case it does, in case
Yeah,
he
and if
is
it
getting,
doesn't, you drop him
yeah,
for a running back
you
after
drop
week
him and
2. Like
you
we'll
move
find
on.
out very soon what their plans are
Yeah.
for him. Like be patient. 3 weeks and we're gonna know.
Yep.
All right, Jeff. This next one I want to talk about near and dear to my heart. Amade Zakius, the wide receiver, 156, 427th overall. Again, we talked about it earlier when discussing Kyle Manungai. I covered the Chicago Bears on these training camp reports and have just been blown away by the gushing from the coaches when it comes to Olamide Zakius. Now, I don't know if he's going to have a big enough role to be fantasy relevant, but I think it's worth picking him up just in case. We saw the big 39-yard touchdown against the Buffalo Bills in that preseason game. We saw him playing primarily out of the slot as well. And I think that long term, they do want Luther Burden to be that guy. But what we hear about Zacchaeus is it's not his athleticism. This is a guy who, similar to, I hate to say it, Amon St. Brown, size adjusted speed score in the 10th percentile. He is not the most athletic guy out there, but he wins on veteran savviness, knowing when to find those soft spots in the zone. And they said that's what they've been doing, is he is running these choice routes where, everybody else has their route that they're running. And they just tell Zacchaeus, go out there and find the open spot and Caleb Williams will hit you. They've been using him in preset motion. He has been blocking in the B and C gaps, just like we saw Monroe St. Brown doing. And I think that there is a possibility that they're just kind of building the offense out. And then they say, hey, good job, Zacchaeus. You got everything, the way it was supposed to be. Now we're going to plug our second round rookie, Luther Burden, in there. But there's also the possibility that that switch doesn't happen until 2026, and Zacchaeus could play in this kind of light Amon-Ra St. Brown type of role where he's seeing 80, 100 targets playing as that primary slot player. What we know about this Bears team is that they're going to spread the ball around a lot more than we had hoped. I think there was this everybody kind of like everybody planted a flag on one guy. Like DJ Moore is going to be the guy, Roma Dunze is going to be the guy, Luther Burden is going to be the guy. But now we're seeing Cole Kmet is involved, Olamide Zacchaeus is involved. This ball's going to get spread around a lot, and I think it's just an offense that I want a part of. Zacchaeus is free in dynasty leagues right now. He is hardly rostered in any leagues out there, and I think he absolutely is worth picking up and stashing.
Yeah, and I think that people don't buy into this because we've seen him before just be basically the vertical threat that you ignore, that he's just on the field and gets ignored, runs downfield and whatever. And okay, like that's not going to play into fantasy production. And I think it's very important to understand one, the type of player that he actually is, because when he was at Virginia, he was being used as a running back, being
Yep.
used as an offensive weapon in the short yardage area, in the intermediate areas of the field. And that's what the Bears are doing. The Bears are allowing him to get volume, to catch the ball and to create after the catch. And I think a lot of I've seen you get a lot of pushback, and you've been on this, and I think you're exactly right, because all you have to do is look a little bit, and this is everywhere in the Bears coverage. It just hasn't really permeated the fantasy football circles, but he's not going to be the deep threat that you just ignore on the field like he has been in the past. He is going to be involved. He's going to be involved in a potential heavy volume role. And I think it's, yes, you're exactly right. This could be the training wheels for Luther Burden. And even halfway into the year, it could be the Luther Burden role. But if you buy into Luther Burden, if you're buying Luther Burden right now, then buy into Amade Zakius in this role right now.
I mean, there was just an article written about the friendship, the relationship, the connection that Caleb Williams and Amade Zakius have forged over the last 4 months. So I know it's a long shot. And, we're talking about a guy here who is ranked outside of the top 150 wide receivers in Dynasty, far from a sure thing, but crazier things have happened. And all the reasons that you can use to knock Zakius, he's a day 3 pick, he doesn't have the speed, yada, 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 all the same things people were saying about Amon St. Brown a few years ago. The difference, of course, is that Amon St. Brown did it immediately as a rookie. Zacchaeus, we're kind of hoping for that like year 6, year 7 breakout, whatever it is. But it's tough to ignore the usage. And one other thing, the last thing I'll say about this, I went back and, we've heard so much about the slot role in a Ben Johnson offense, whether it was Brian Hartline, Jarvis Landry. I remember Jarvis Landry coming onto the scene and looking like one of the best wide receivers in football. Like he was in top 10 discussions. His best season, most targets he ever had, came in his age 25 year, and he was playing with Ben Johnson that year. Ben Johnson, he left the year after, left Miami to go play in Cleveland. Never saw more than 85 targets again after that, after seeing 125 in his final year with Ben Johnson. And we saw from there on out that Jarvis Landry, a fine football player, but kind of just a guy that was out there, not the game changer that we saw in Miami. So much of Ben Johnson's offense is predicated on getting the ball to that slot receiver across the middle of the field, and then they can stretch offenses horizontally with Roma Dunze and DJ Moore on the outside. It's just deafening drumbeat. It's too loud to ignore at this point. So glad we were able to talk about it today. Jeff, last guy, RB 118, 465 overall. Talk to me about Chris Brooks.
Yeah, Chris Brooks has been really, the opportunity has arisen because of Marshawn Lloyd's inability to stay on the field, and Emmanuel Wilson has missed time as well. But they've really utilized Chris Brooks as the backup to Josh Jacobs, utilizing him in the passing game. I mean, there is a story right now on GreenBayPackers.com saying Chris Brooks has been the Packers' back of all trades this off season, and I think that he's not even on the radar. And I think that if you were to poll people, he would be the running back 4 in everybody's minds for this Packers team. I think he's got a great opportunity to be the running back 2 when it comes down to it. And for me, he is a bigger back, but they've been using him quite a bit in the passing game. And if you're taking the passing down reps, if Josh Jacobs were to miss time, it would be a committee. They all hands on deck. But I think that Brooks would have a case to be the passing down back, but also his size and physicality could give him the opportunity to be the goal line back as well. And so if you're telling me that we believe in his passing ability, also the size can be the goal line guy, I'm starting to see a potential 3 down back in what should be a very good offense. And I think this is, any league that you're in, he is probably on the waiver wire. It's a potential plug in should Josh Jacobs miss time. And really, players like this aren't on deep dynasty waivers very
Right.
often.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. And when we talked about Phil Mafa earlier, Chris Brooks, almost identical. Like 2 pounds less than him at the combine, but the same type of build. We're looking at a 6'1", nearly 240 pounds, just a big bruising back. And we saw last year that this is how the Packers want to play football. Like whether it was Jordan Love or Malik Willis out there, they were just pounding it down defenses' throats and forcing them to stop them, and they couldn't. So Josh Jacobs, obviously, much better technical runner, better footwork, all those things. But Chris Brooks can come in and spell Josh Jacobs and just be that hammer that wears defenses down. So I like that call out a lot. And obviously, we had big expectations for Marshawn Lloyd, but even the people who don't like throwing around the term injury plagued, or I'm sorry, injury prone, starting to throw around that term with Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, it's been a tough start to his career. So I got to be honest, Jeff, I was a little shocked when you mentioned Chris Brooks, that you wanted to talk about him in the show today. I just kind of assumed Emmanuel Wilson was ahead of him, but yeah, you talk about it. I'm going to read that article as soon as we get off this show. Definitely worth a deeper look. And again, these are guys that we're talking about that are free in most leagues. I mean, we're talking free agents in probably 80 to 90% of dynasty leagues out there. But this is a fun show to really look through these depth charts and try to find some potential hidden gold. And Jeff, any closing thoughts on this one?
Casey Washington's a name to know too for the
There you go.
Falcons. He
Yeah.
making splash plays, stepped in Darnell Mooney's absence, second-year player. The Falcons want to go down the field, and Casey Washington has stepped in there. So if you really just want another deep name to throw it in there that I didn't add on the sheet. But these are the players
I've never
that
seen something. I just pulled up his keep trade cut. It says wide receiver 655 for Casey Washington.
Yeah.
Wow.
Telling you.
Wow. I didn't even know their rankings went that deep. Dynasty value is 0.
Yeah, and these guys are an injury away from being an injury away in
Right,
sometimes
right.
situations, but at the same time, you want sleepers, you want names that are not being talked about. I mean, we just fed a bunch of them to you.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like we're getting deep here. This is the Dynasty show. We're looking for these deep polls. Like when I was tweeting about Amade Zakius today, who's a round 20 pick in best ball drafts. I couldn't believe how many people in my comments were saying, why would I draft him when I could just get Keenan Allen instead? Not realizing that Keenan Allen is going in round 10. Like we're talking about deep sleepers here. Like we're not telling you to drop Keenan Allen for Casey Washington. We're saying if you're in a sicko league with 14, 16 teams, deep benches, things of that nature, these are guys that should be on your radar. This is a fun one, Jeff. This got the brain juices flowing, really talking about some deep cuts here. So I want to thank everybody who took the time in. If you're still watching, congratulations on being a sicko just like Jeff and I. I want to thank everybody who took the time for tuning in. We'll be back next week, probably talking about roster cuts, some other things happening around the NFL. And then, of course, if you haven't listened yet to the audio only show, please check that out. We're really enjoying doing that. The episodes have been coming out on Tuesday night. Jeff Bell and I being joined with Dan Hindry, just looking through every bit of news you need to go in training camp. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.